Hello. This is Capital Ideas Live, the video version of the magazine on business in Moscow. I'm John Harrison.
Living in a forest amidst a metropolis, it can be true. Some people think they might go out and meet a deer or an elk in the center of Moscow. Pharmaceutical investments, risky or reliable?
The rate of growing of Russian market is around 13% per year.
Watch it now. Capital Ideas Live.
The image that comes to mind when you say the word Moscow is the Kremlin's red walls, some onion domes, Stalin-esque type skyscrapers. But in fact, Moscow is one of Europe's greenest cities. But how well do these parks, these green lungs of Moscow actually work? Do Muscovites really have enough clean and fresh air to breathe? In this program, Moscow's ecologists share their opinions on whether the environment is safe or toxic.
A modern city dweller is used to the idea that a metropolitan environment is definitely harmful. 30% of diseases, after all, are brought on by environmental issues. Thus, a key significant role in environmental protection is taken up by ecologists. But there's no need to worry about anything if you're in a so-called green area. They reduce the concentration of harmful substances in the atmosphere, and it makes no difference where the wind is blowing in from. The landscaping of the capital within the My Street and Million Trees programs is in full swing. The total area of green spaces in the city is 54%, which is almost 3 times more than in Paris and 13 times more than in Beijing. The establishment of parks and the creation of new spaces for relaxation encourages citizens to engage in sports out in the open air. A public movement is being launched and gives a lot of energy to people to manage outdoor areas such as yards, parks and green areas. People are communicating with each other and training together. It's trendy to be sporty in Moscow. Bicycle paths are being built and tracks are being created along embankments. Workout areas are a kind of fitness class that's open for everyone. Perhaps while we're outdoor training, your metabolism can be changed. I'm not a doctor, but I myself feel better when I'm training in the open air. But even activists living a healthy lifestyle usually have their own vehicles. Everyone is aware that any type of motor transport causes serious damage and losses for nature in large cities, polluting the air and water. That's why the Moscow Department of Nature Management and Environmental Protection is closely cooperating with the Moscow Department of Transport and Development. The results are impressive. The volume of harmful emissions has been reduced by 120,000 tons in 7 years. We've reached a crowded street where we've encountered heavy traffic, but the concentration of emissions has not increased at all. Common sense tells us that although we can't say that the metropolitan air is entirely clean, it's not dangerous or harmful. Improving the environment is a priority task, but now, in fact, we believe that Moscow is becoming a city with a comfortable environment.
One thing is for certain, the future of Moscow for decades is being created right now. An ecological city is being built. But what does that mean? Let's discuss this with Anton Kulvachevsky, the head of the Nature Management Department of Moscow city governments. Moscow is of course a very green city already, but when urban developers ask people what they would like to see changed, apparently they answer that another park or garden near them wouldn't be a bad idea. It's almost as if Muscovites want to live in the forest whilst being in the city. How does this influence your policies?
That's a matter of psychology, you're right. The citizens lack contact with nature and they feel deprived. Some people think that living in the center of Moscow, they can go out and meet a deer or an elk. But that's not true, of course. But Russian law establishes that residential areas should have at least 40% green territory. That provides for ecological protection. In the old parts of Moscow, there's 54% of the territory that is green. Those green areas that we already have in the city centre won't increase, with the exception, no doubt, of new forms like green walls or green roofs and so on and so forth.
In your interview to Capital Ideas magazine, you said that Moscow's becoming a smart city. What exactly do you mean by that?
Smart cities are made by smart people. Moscow has great human potential. If we have intellectual resources, innovative sites, techno-parks that are being created right now, innovation technologies and high-tech jobs, I'm sure that Moscow, as a smart city, has a future and always will have.
Moscow's biggest parks can be called the lungs of the city. Do they need any special protection from the people and developers?
These territories have special legal protection regimes, the toughest in Russia, both for federal and municipal lands. Nothing can be done there unless it's for educational or tourist goals, or, in certain cases, for sports activities. So where else can one go to enjoy sports in Moscow? To our park territories, of course.
What's Moscow's ecological strategy for the next few decades?
Our main aim is to decrease car pollution by 30% in comparison with today's situation and provide a 20% pollution reduction around living areas. We want to give an impulse to the recycling sphere and to improve water quality, of course. And as the air improves, all other natural environments will also improve.
It's hard to evaluate investments made into the environment, but when a city invests into the health of its citizens, that city wins.
Thanks to state support, medicines in Russia are becoming more affordable. According to the statistics, the number of Moscow residents who show a preference for drugs developed and manufactured in Russia has increased in recent times. If customers know that there's a domestic option for a drug at an equal price, then they'll opt for that over the imported version. Nowadays, the pharmaceutical industry is reaching one of the highest levels of growth rates. In 2000, 90% of the medicines used to treat tuberculosis were imported. Now 90% are produced in Russia. In fact, these medicines are now exported to dozens of countries all over the world. According to various estimates, about 2 billion has been invested by foreigners in the national market over the last 10 years. Localizing their production in Russia, they essentially become local manufacturers, entitling them to support and various benefits. In our country, the pharmaceutical market is stable. It's attracting the involvement of foreign investors. Since 2013, 19 new plants have been initiated, 7 of which have been built with the participation of well-known Western companies. The production of life-saving and essential medicines is consistent. The share of the national production of medicines and drugs is 83%, and we are on target to reach 90% by the end of next year. There are several producers of medical goods, but there are also several enterprises manufacturing raw materials in Russia. The government approved a preference of 25% of the price for companies which are providing the full cycle of medicine production on the territories of the country members of the Eurasian Union to improve the general situation. This measure will definitely result in the strengthening and development of the entire pharmaceuticals industry in Russia.
A nation's health cannot be maintained properly without its own pharmaceutical industry. Up until quite recently, Russia was importing about 1/3 of its medicines from abroad. The sanctions and other events have changed all that, and now gradually Russia's relying on its own pharmaceutical companies. But that doesn't mean to say the market's closed for foreigners. And that's a subject we talked about with Vikram Punia, the president of the Pharmaceutical company here in Moscow a few days ago. Is your company actually importing pharmaceuticals into Russia, or are you producing them here?
We are a company which is making the drugs here inside the country. We have 5 factories today.
Right.
Yeah, these factories are located from St. Petersburg to the Far East. And we do different forms of pharmaceutical, including solid dosage form, infusions, liquids, lyophilized products, and all.
What about the raw materials you need to produce the things, the medicines? They're locally sourced, or you still have to import them?
I think about 90% of the substances are imported at this moment, but things are changing. Things are changing, yeah. And for example, we are investing about $300 million in the next 3-4 years' time to make the substances here in Russia. Basically, we are making the drugs to treat serious diseases like HIV, like hepatitis, tuberculosis, oncology diseases, and autoimmune diseases.
How difficult was it to receive permissions, the necessary legal permissions to be able to do what you do?
Into history like 1999 or 2000, at that time it was very difficult to get some permission. Things were not very transparent, and there were many problems in getting some permission for starting a new business. For the startup, it was difficult really. But I can say that situation has changed totally now. Getting this permission, receiving this permission from the government, if you do the proper documentation, I don't see any problems in receiving any permission for construction, for clinical trials, for registration of the drugs. Now, Russian pharma companies are really doing high-tech products. In 2010, for treatment of HIV, in Russia, around 90+% of the drugs were imported.
Wow.
And today, the situation is such that more than 70% of the products are made in Russia. I see a Russian market as a Russian pharmaceutical market as a fastest growing market in the world. The rate of growing of Russian market is around 13% per year. And one more thing I would like to say is that the level of corruption has gone so down.
Right.
And things are changing again in this field as well for more better situation. Russia now is a country of opportunity, I can say.
Next year, the world will be attracted to Moscow stadiums. Russians are preparing to hold one of the largest sporting events in the world. And football's always been popular here, but the championships that are about to be held will change the face of this city.
The Soviet-style stadium, Dynamo, has been completely rebuilt, and the new arena has been constructed on the site of the former Tushino airport. Next time on Capital Ideas Live, is there a life after the championship when everyone's gone home?
Thank you very much for watching today's program. I hope you've enjoyed it. Tune in again for next week's instalment. My name's John Harrison.